Welcome to Activate Your Introvert, the weekly radio show to uncover and unlock the entrepreneurial skills in your business. In this week's show, helping internal validation. Can introverts sell? And an interview with Will Kintish. Will is a UK leading authority in business networking training. He shows people how to become effective online networkers, and hopefully again soon he'll be able to help them with their face-to-face networking skills as we may one day soon come out of lockdown. Just before speaking to Will though, an idea to help you manage the introverts in your team by thinking about internal validation. You've probably noticed how most introverts aren't big on self-promotion, as they prefer their work to speak out for them. You'll be helping yourself and them if you recognise that. That doesn't mean praising them more, although, let's be honest, some praise never hurts, but your praise is external validation. Most introverts prefer internal validation. Help them to validate themselves by helping them realise what makes a good job in terms of some specific elements, and then help them to see what they're doing well at that level. Now, they know that you value them, as your comments are at a level of detail they appreciate, rather than a simple, "Oh, that's good," and they're better equipped for future internal validation. Do let me know what tip you'd like to activate the entrepreneurial skills in your business, or what introvert myth you'd like exposed. Drop me an email, give me a call, or add it as a comment to your review on the iTunes store. I'd love to hear from you. But now it's time for this week's interview. Welcome, Will.
Thanks for inviting me, John.
It's great to have you on the show. Just before we start talking about networking skills, are you an introvert or an extrovert? And more importantly, what does it mean to you?
In my mind, there is no doubt whatsoever, I am an extrovert, textbook extrovert. Love going to events. I will go to the opening of an envelope, John. I absolutely love meeting new people. And I think the massive difference, having studied it a little bit, not as much as you, but having studied it a little bit, when I go home or I'm back on the train or back in the car after the event, I am on a high. Whereas I understand good people like yourself who claim to be an introvert, you are absolutely worn out and have to go into a dark room when you get home. Me, I'll go home and won't be able to go to bed because I'll think, oh, I met John and I met Mary, and I met these people and they told me this, and I make some notes and I invite them to link in, and I try and keep the event going as long as possible on that particular day.
Wow, and you're absolutely right. I will get back and I'll just go, right, I need silence for a while. Well, I guess networking has changed a lot since lockdown, and whether it'll ever go back, of course, to being the same as it was, I don't really know. But what do you think the main changes have been?
This is the most fascinating thing, John. It hasn't changed at all. Networking, you'll agree with me, is building relationships. You, me, and everybody in the world, we network from the age of 2. In my opinion, it is simply talking to people, it's communicating. So we go to an event or we go on a Zoom meeting. We start to chat. We ask each other questions. We listen carefully. If occasionally it's a business conversation, if we spot an aha moment, as I call it, or a light bulb moment where we think we can move the relationship forward, we do the follow-up. And then if we do the follow-up in real life, we would go and have a meeting with them. At the moment, the follow-up perhaps might be a second Zoom meeting. So as far as I'm concerned, John, networking is building relationships. We can do it nearly as well online as we can face-to-face. The difference is, of course, when you're in the same space and looking at them, you've just got that metaphorical, you can touch them metaphorically, you can feel them, you can smell them. You just feel that though you know them that little bit better than looking through the screen, but everything else is very, very similar.
So I think the important thing I got from that is the follow-up. When we talk about networking, I often talk to people and they'll assume it's all about getting new business, but I guess for people in corporates as well, networking is important, career development and getting to know people. Same things apply?
As far as I'm concerned, number one crime in networking is try and sell. Yes, of course, we're all looking for new business, but I always say we're looking for new opportunities. And what are those opportunities? A is to help other people. B is to share our knowledge. C is to gain information for ourselves. And then it's simply a case of finding out whether anybody has a need for our services. We can't create need, but when we ask insightful questions and somebody says to you something like, do you know what, John, I might be interested in talking to you further about that. Or do you know what, John, I didn't know about that. Those are what I call aha phrases. And you follow it up. You ask a few more questions and then you make a suggestion. Look, now isn't the time to discuss this. Perhaps we ought to have another Zoom meeting or even a phone call, or when we get back live, perhaps we'll go and have a beer, or I'll come to your office, or you'll come to my office. It's just a case of chatting. That's it, chatting.
The interesting thing you said there was it's thinking what your aha moments are going to be, because being an introvert, I'll think of things in my head beforehand. But what you just said is look for the aha moments. So I guess I need to know what an aha moment might look like.
Okay. So you know what I do? I show people how to develop their networking skills online and offline. My marketplace is generally the advice giving business industry, which is made up of professional, financial, and academics. And if I meet somebody reasonably senior in one of those industries and they ask me what I do, I tell them, and they say, so let's talk about senior people at universities. They say, do you know what? Our students are rubbish at networking. Or a partner of a law firm says, I wish I could get my staff to go out more. I think I can help you. And this is where the big thinking has to change. You never think sell, you think help. You think I can develop your business by helping your people to become better at networking. What you are doing, John, unless you're a con man or con woman, you are going to charge X amount of money for your services. But the value that you should be giving to the prospect, hopefully then a client, is X times 2, 3, 4, 5. So you are doing the prospect a disservice by not offering to follow up and then suggest that you put a proposal to them, because you are giving them that gift of your knowledge, your experience, and your expertise, for which they will pay, but for which will be a lot cheaper than had they not learnt from you.
Brilliant, and I love that that reminder to us all that we should be helping people. So we're starting to run out of time, I'm afraid, Will. But what one tip would you give to an introvert who's trying to, I don't know, work the Zoom?
I'm guessing, John, that since lockdown, for the introvert, this must be like manna from heaven, because they don't have to walk into that room. So to the introvert, my strong advice to all of us is not to be looking for new connections while we're in lockdown, but we ought to be going back to past connections, re-energize, reinforce old connections, go back through your level 1 connections, people that you've dealt with before, even where you've perhaps sent proposals to people and they've said no thank you. Go back to them, just see how they're getting on. My life changed 20 years ago when I moved from being an accountant to do what I'm doing now, through a man who is my guiding light called Dale Carnegie, who wrote that very famous book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And to the introvert, I want to say to you, I want you to be the most interesting person in the room. And how do we do that? Here's the Dale Carnegie quote 80 years ago. The most interesting people we ever meet are those who are most interested in us. So message to the introvert, just ask questions about the other person and they will find you the most fascinating character.
Fantastic, thank you. And one other tip I'll look for is for perhaps for non-introverts who want to network with introverts.
That's a great question. If I go up to somebody and through their body language, and it's a lot harder on screen than it is face to face, I go up to somebody and I watch their body language, I generally can work out whether they're a quieter, shyer person. And if they are, I lower my tone of voice and I ask very gentle questions. The problem often with the introvert, John, is that they don't ask you questions because
Because they're introverts, yeah.
Because they're introverts. Unfortunately for them, I have the Kintish 4-question rule. If I ask somebody 4 questions and they don't ask me anything, I think, well, this is turning into an interview or even an interrogation. Or I think, well, you don't want to talk to me. You don't ask me anything about me. So when it's a physical networking event, I'm afraid to tell you, I will dump you in a very courteous and polite manner. I will say, John, it's nice to have met you. Enjoy the event. And I will go off and meet other people. Strong message to the introvert is be interested by asking questions.
So I'm now going to very courteously dump you. So we're running out of time, Will. Thank you. But seriously, Will, I'm absolutely sure that some of the listeners would love to get back in touch with you.
Well, I've got 2 things. One is Kintish, kintish.co.uk. But I'd love them to link in with me. But every relationship starts somewhere, whether it's face-to-face or online. So whenever you are going to invite me or anybody in the world, make sure that if you've never met them before properly, you invite them with a personal invitation and tell them why you're inviting them. So your listeners might say, Will, I heard your interview with John Baker. Perhaps we can link in. And that way I see them as a legitimate contact. But if they just send me that one liner, can we link in? I think, well, who are you and what do you want?
Thank you very much. It's been fantastic to talk to you.
Thanks for inviting me.
And now it's time for Introvert Myth of the Week. Those crazy stories that I hear and you hear, but some people actually believe. This week's myth is a common one, held by introverts and extroverts. It's a harmful myth, as it's wrong, and because introverts often believe it themselves, they do themselves a disservice. Introverts can't sell. It's rubbish. It's going in the bin. What does good selling require? Good listening skills, good questioning skills, and a desire to help other people with your services where appropriate. Selling does not need you to batter somebody into submission or, as a double-glazing salesman recently tried with me, an outpouring of how good he is and how good his product is without even asking what I wanted. He got short shrift. There's more ideas on how to sell on the sleeve notes, or listen again to my interview with Ben Kench, author of Selling for Dummies. Thank you for listening to Activate Your Introvert, and I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode. I'd love to see your reviews on the iTunes store. Thank you once again, and catch up with you next week.